Good morning, everybody. Happy Thursday. Have an amazing show for everybody today. What do we have, Krystal?
Indeed we do. Jam-packed show. John Mearsheimer weighing in on whether or not the ceasefire is going to hold. We've got some terrible answers from Cory Booker and Gavin Newsom when they are questioned on AIPAC. Both of their brains just appeared to completely melt, so those will be fun to react to. Major updates in terms of our trade war with China. Big moves being made by the Trump administration. Also big moves being made in terms of regime change in Venezuela. The CIA apparently being greenlit for covert regime change activities. So that's great. DHS caught lying about several incidents in Chicago. And David Sirota is going to join us on a couple of incredibly consequential upcoming Supreme Court decisions that could completely remake the electoral map and the political contribution, the money in politics map, I guess we'll say as well. So a lot of big stories breaking this morning.
Yes, that's right. Thank you to everybody who has been signing up, breakingpoints.com, if you're able to support the show and become a premium member. If you can't afford it, no worries. Just please go ahead and hit subscribe to our YouTube channel. And if you're listening to this on a podcast, rate us 5 stars or send your favorite episode to a friend. It really helps us grow. So with that, let's go ahead and get to Israel. As you said, Professor John Mearsheimer weighing in on the ceasefire. We always look to him for his Trenton analysis. Here was his immediate reaction.
I think you greatly underestimate, Piers, how deeply committed the Israelis are to ethnically cleansing both Gaza and the West Bank. The Israelis now have a situation where there are roughly as many Palestinians as there are Israeli Jews inside of Greater Israel. And this is an unacceptable situation for most Israelis. And they're completely committed to ethnically cleansing Gaza and then the West Bank. I think the evidence is overwhelming on this. Now, you say President Trump sees this as a great opportunity to prove that he's a statesman and he can bring peace to the Middle East. I think in principle that he'd love to do that. But I've written a book with Steve Walt on the Israel lobby, and there's absolutely no question in my mind that if President Trump gets rough with Prime Minister Netanyahu, Netanyahu will turn to the lobby, and the lobby will force Trump to back off. There's no way Trump is going to get tough with Netanyahu if he violates the ceasefire.
Some good words from the professor. And look, already we're seeing a few indications. Nobody really knows. Right now, Trump's laser focused, at least for him, on the Israel ceasefire. He doesn't want it to break. What about a week from now? What about a month from now? What about 2 months from now? Because Zelensky's going to be here on Friday, and next thing you know, that's going to be the biggest story in the world. His attention is going to start going this way. Steve Witkoff is running that negotiation too. So all of the groundwork by Israel is being laid. Let's go and put this up here on the screen. For example, there's currently some major conflict between Hamas and Israel over the question of the dead hostages, Israeli hostages' bodies. President Trump at the White House yesterday said, quote, "This is a very difficult process. They are digging. There are areas where they are digging and finding a lot of bodies. Some of the bodies have been there for a long time. Some of the bodies are under soil. Some are in tunnels." This comes, though, at the very same time that all of the groundwork on the Israeli side is being laid for both trying to negate the ceasefire over this conflict over bodies being returned, but also Israeli ministers just saying the quiet part out loud. Let's put this up here. For example, you have Finance Minister Smotrich who vowed, quote, "There will be Jewish settlements in Gaza." Direct contravention, both of the ceasefire agreement, the phase 2, phase 3, eventual coalitional provisional authority plan, from everything that Donald Trump has said about I will not allow Israel or, to annex the West Bank or Gaza. But here's what he says. And I mean, this is part of the difficulty, is that for those of us, Krystal, who know how to read the Israeli press or hit Google Translate, it's all a very different story. If you listen to Mark Levin or any of these other folks, he says literally, "So we have patience, we have determination and faith. With God's help, we will continue the series of victories and the big miracles," he says, in relation specifically to Jewish settlement of Gaza, directly from his mouth. And yeah, I mean, I don't think it gets much more clear than that. And you fit that with John Mearsheimer's pronunciation. Now, listen, maybe Smotrich is just a fringe part of the government. He has gotten a hell of a lot of what he wanted throughout the prosecution of this war. He's one of the most powerful parts of that coalition. What would some sort of future coalition look like that would even replace Bibi? By the way, Bibi's corruption trial delayed. If anybody's wondering, can we just, do we have that? I forget exactly
yeah, I think
where
the
it
last
is.
element in the
A8, please. If you're wondering, for his own political survival, he delayed his corruption trial. He has bronchitis. You know, he didn't, he wanted to make sure that he didn't pass his bronchitis to others.
He's such a thoughtful
such a
gentleman,
thoughtful
isn't he?
guy. He's such a thoughtful guy, having bronchitis and just thinking of everybody else.
This is
like
better,
that.
though, than the alternative. Usually when his corruption trial is upcoming, then he'll decide to bomb some other country.
Yeah, that's right.
Literally, that's happened multiple times to be, oh, well, we can't do the trial now. We're in a war with Iran. What are we going to do? So him having bronchitis is, I guess, a better alternative to the way he's gotten out of the trial in the past.
Yes, that is a good point. But in general, that seems to be the direction where things are going, and already things are starting to fall apart in Gaza that show some of the folly of the Trump administration's plan here.
Yeah, well, and Israel already slow walking some of the things they agreed to in the initial ceasefire deal. So they're supposed to be opening up the Rafah crossing on the Egyptian side. They say, hey, we're ready to go. Israel has not yet done that, so they're slow walking that. Obviously, they immediately tried to say, oh, Hamas is violating the deal because we were supposed to get all of the bodies of hostages back. Well, in reality, everyone understood that this would be very, very difficult. You have the Gaza Strip buried in rubble, 85% of it turned into rubble. Hamas has also been banned, like Israel has banned all of the heavy earth-moving equipment from going in. So how exactly do you think that they can achieve what you want them to in getting the bodies out from under the rubble? In the ceasefire deal, it contemplated all of this. It was understood in the deal that this would be difficult, that time would need to be taken, that they would need equipment to be able to do this. This was all supposed to be overseen by, there was, collaboration with international bodies to make sure this was going and proceeding at pace. So far, the Trump administration has said, we don't think that Hamas is in violation of the deal, even as the Israelis are pushing that idea, and, which also obviously gives them an excuse to go back to murder and killing. Not that they ever stopped, okay? Let's keep in mind that Israel has already multiple times violated the ceasefire agreement and killed Palestinians, even post-hostage release. So you can see the direction they're trying to push in. And this is why Mearsheimer's comments are really important because, yeah, at the moment, it seems that Trump wants the deal to hold for the moment. But Netanyahu will be relentless. They will never stop. The Israel lobby will never stop. They will keep pushing. They will keep looking for vulnerabilities. They will keep trying to do everything they can to go back to the killing, to go back to the death. And so it will take a lot of focus and a lot of determination from this president to avoid that outcome.
Were you the one who said that it makes you nervous how much the Israel lobby in the U.S. Yeah.
How much like Miriam Adelson,
yeah,
and they're
I've been thinking about that.
I love this deal.
Yeah, anything that they're super pleased about. The best you could hope for from them would just be silence, because it means they're mad, but they don't want to say anything. But the fact that they're all out there cheering, I'm like, I don't know. There's something a little sketchy, I think, that's going on here. And by the way, I want to just highlight something that we spent a lot of time on with Ryan yesterday, which is the post-war administration of Gaza. So, for example, we played everybody this amazing clip, honestly, from Trump, who was like, yeah, Hamas executed some guys. Frankly, I don't have a problem with that. That's what he said. He said, I don't have a problem with that. But apparently his government does have a problem with that. Let's put it up here on the screen. This is from CENTCOM. They say, quote, "We strongly urge Hamas to immediately suspend violence, shooting at innocent Palestinians in Gaza, in both Hamas-held parts of Gaza and those secured by the IDF behind the yellow line. This is a historic opportunity for peace. Hamas should seize it fully by standing down, strictly adhering to President Trump's 20-point peace plan, disarming without delay. We have conveyed our concerns to the mediators who worked with us to enforce the peace and protect innocent Gaza civilians. We remain highly optimistic for the future of peace in the region." Now, in terms of what's actually going on, it's extremely chaotic, and it is a reminder of what a place with some 1.8, 1.7 million people, whoever's left alive, which has no civilian law enforcement authority. It's just like Afghanistan. It's just like Iraq. When you take out the central administration and you leave it to rubble, what's going to arise in its place? Warlords. That's literally what's happening. Let's put this next one up here. This is from the Wall Street Journal, which actually has some reports reporters and sources inside of Gaza. What they're talking about, quote, is that after Israeli withdrawal, Hamas has launched a violent crackdown on rivals in Gaza. Effectively, apparently what has happened is that there are these non-Hamas parties, powerful Palestinian families who have certain networks in particular cities, and you also have these Israeli-backed kind of gangs inside of Gaza who are seen as collaborators by Hamas and by some of the local population, although some of those local population also do certainly support them. And so almost immediately within the vacuum of no more bombing there has been a violent outbreak for literal law and order. And we read yesterday, Ryan, an interview with a Palestinian community leader who lives in Gaza, and he was like, no, I support Hamas because some of these guys were stealing flour from little children and then selling it on the black market, right? And so in some cases, they're like, no, kill them. They're like, please, somebody go and get them. But it gets to the point of, if you lay down your arms, which, technically they are agreed to in their 20-point peace plan, they're also kind of de facto accepting some sort of law enforcement authority. But it gets to this point about political legitimacy in the post-war state, because the only way to ensure that stuff like this doesn't happen, and we don't have an Afghanistan where we have warlords in the north who hate the warlords in the south, and everybody's always beefing and basically warring over opium drug routes and getting the U.S. military to back them. Well, the only alternative is occupation. But who is going to occupy? I mean, the Israelis certainly aren't going to do it, or at least the Palestinian people wouldn't want to live with that. The UAE, Saudi Arabia, they just simply don't have enough troops. They don't even have weapons, so expertise and counterinsurgency. Like, this is a nightmare just waiting to happen. You can see exactly how the collapse and the eventual descent into civil war is so easy to see on the horizon. And Trump is going to own all of that because he's the chairman of this peace board, right, which he put into place. So I would actually say that this is the perfect example of what is to come for years and years and years if they don't have their own ability to have any faith or democratic legitimacy, something in their input into who governs the state and what that's going to look like.
That's true. And I mean, Israel backed some of these groups and armed some of these groups. They were accused and alleged to have, based on reporting, to have commandeered some of the aid trucks. And so, listen, I'm not condoning. Is anyone surprised that Hamas is taking out and executing? Not just, there were people who were actively collaborating with Israelis. The Israelis admit some of this. And part of what the Israelis did in backing these groups internally is help to set up the conditions for potential civil strife, civil war, societal breakdown. So yeah, of course, it's very volatile. Hamas is trying to reassert control. They're trying to reassert some sort of, in a certain sense, like a vigilante justice, but some sort of brutal law and order here in the absence of, every civil society institution has been destroyed. Like, there's no courts. The police, the government police, security services were targeted by Israel because they were quote unquote Hamas. Well, yeah, of course, the government is Hamas. Every government worker is technically Hamas. And those were some of the people who were targeted early on, which again creates more of an atmosphere of lawlessness and chaos. So obviously very, very volatile and dangerous situation.
Yeah,
right now.
Exactly. And then that's really what we want to stick with, is because we just don't know really what's happening. Let's put A6, for example, up on the screen. We can just show you have some of these anti-Hamas Gazan militias. Now they're claiming we control numerous parts of northern Gaza, do not approach our areas of control. I just, for those of us who lived through the war in Iraq, this is what it was like every single day. You had different parts of Baghdad where you would have some Shia militia put out videos. I mean, basically just lesser quality shot on a handy cam that looked exactly like that, which would get released on the early internet. And you'd be like, okay, this neighborhood is controlled by these dudes. Syria was very similar, covering that civil war. You had not even just provinces, like areas within provinces, areas within Aleppo, where it's like, oh, they control this, they control that. And these guys would be at war all the time. Qatar and Saudi would back one person, the Turks would back another, the Syrian government was involved. That's what causes the death, the chaos, really, to come. And that's what I worry about really the most. And then you have, in a similar way to the Syrians or, Americans or whatever in Iraq, you have this kind of overarching nemesis as well, where you also have the Israelis, which are involved here. So for example, let's put this up here on the screen. You had Al Jazeera reporting yesterday that Israeli tanks were firing at Palestinians in some towns, which I'm still not exactly clear. They claim for most of these firings, they had crossed the yellow line, like into their line of control.
Well, they claimed that they were approaching the yellow line.
So
approaching.
So it's like, well, then you also are still in the imprisonment, effectively, of these people are, at the total mercy. And that's the same circumstance which led to October 7th, which led to Hamas, which led to a lot of the support, right, for some of these parties. If we think to, I forget the exact name of it, but what was it? In 2021, there was that nonviolent march.
Great March of Return.
Yeah, the Great March of Return to the fence where you had snipers and other people who were killed. So it's like, if this is going to be the status quo of some sort of militarized buffer zone where you get shot for even approaching, and then you also have literal lawlessness in the streets. Yes, you have aid trucks and all of that, but there's going to be wars and things that break out over that. So some of the worst parts of the war in Afghanistan, the war in Iraq, the war in Syria, any lawless place, Somalia, Sudan, you're going to see replicate. And that is when things can actually get even more insane, possibly, than where we are right now, because that leads to a widespread cult of violence, a political vacuum, and you have no idea what can possibly come out of that. Well, that's nobody predicted, or very few predicted, in 2003, that we would give rise to al-Qaeda's greatest dream and eventually ISIS, the retaking of Mosul, and a 20-year U.S. occupation or U.S. experiment in Iraq. Same with Afghanistan. I'm just watching the ingredients all here. And, unfortunately, it doesn't take a genius to figure any of this stuff out. He said it from day one, but that's just not what the Israelis were ever interested in doing. And I can't fall away from this. The whole point was to destroy Hamas. And now the war is over, according to the Americans, and Hamas is retaking control of Gaza. So what does that tell you about the prospect of the war?
Yeah.
The point of the war.
And do you think that Bibi is just going to allow that to occur?
No.
And be okay with Hamas reasserting control over the Gaza Strip? I mean, because the only parts of this deal, Trump likes to frame it as a peace plan and likes to talk up all the 20 points or 22 points or whatever the heck it is. The only pieces that were actually agreed to was this very initial phase of the hostage return, the withdrawal from a portion of the Gaza Strip, the reopening of the Rafah crossing, the increase in the aid that is surged into the Strip. Beyond that, none of the underlying issues that led to October 7th, that have led to endless conflict, none of that has been resolved. And very hard to see how they're going to be able to come to terms on these later stages. It would, again, basically just require Trump forcing the Israelis into it and, being willing to withhold arms and withhold aid and actually going to the mat to force some terms on them that they are not going to particularly like. That is what it would take. But none of those underlying issues have been resolved at this point. We were referring to the yellow line and what is Israel doing with regard to this. So Israel's president, Israel Katz, said the IDF operates in accordance with directives and enforces a clear policy of preparedness along the yellow line, which includes over 50% of Gaza's territory, which is an important reminder that IDF still occupies 50% of the Gaza Strip. The enforcement policy is unequivocal for every violation and immediate response. Yesterday, terrorists who attempted to approach and cross were thwarted, and so it will be in the future as well. So that is his explanation for why they're continuing to fire on and kill Palestinians, is because they were approaching the yellow line and that they're in a state of constant, quote unquote, preparedness. So, and Ryan tweeted this and said, Israel's redefinition of the word ceasefire to allow for them to fire at will at people they claim to believe might have been approaching a yellow line is one of their more sordid contributions to the world. Well said, as always, from Ryan there.
Yeah, I think it is an important point. So there's a couple of views of the future. There's mass civil war. There's coalitional authority, some sort of nightmarish, attempt to try to govern this. There's also the status quo itself was a nightmare for the Gazan people, that we have to remember, the so-called mowing the lawn strategy. So there's that on top of a collapse of their entire civil society. So I have just no idea where things are going to go for them and for their own ability to find some sort of political solution to whatever it is, like the ability to live in peace. And you can't do that under bombardment. You can't do it in a civil war either. And in the interim, it just seems like all of that is incredibly likely. And the international community, they just want to hit the pressure release valve and say the hostage and all that is over. And they've just never understood. It's like for them, there has been a perpetual state of conflict since occupation itself, in particular since 2005, and the blockade and all of that beginning. And 50% of their population is very young. So think about the formative years for them, about their even frankly, like how can you have faith in a democratic process at all when the only time you had an election, the election was deemed illegitimate by the authorities and the powers that be from Israel and from the United States. So I don't know. I don't know where things go. I just don't think it's going to be good. And Professor Mearsheimer's words are very, very prescient.
He's been right about a lot. So
he's been right about everything.
Yeah, that's why we.
It's time to just say he's always right about everything. For all of his critics and everything, they just they try to point to one or two things, but like listen, the guy who wrote the Israel, like he predicted and called all of this. He called Ukraine, called Russia, all of it. Hey, if you like that video, hit the like button or leave a comment below. It really helps get the show to more people.
And if you'd like to get the full show ad-free and in your inbox every morning, you can sign up at breakingpoints.com.
That's right. Get the full show, help support the future of independent media at breakingpoints.com.